Hare Krishna, welcome. Welcome once again to our weekly duty worship webinar. And today we have a pretty amazing topic. It's actually, we're discussing Srila Jiva Goswami. So that, that's, at least for me, that's a very interesting topic, and I'm sure for all of you it's also a very interesting topic. As you understand, Jiva Goswami is one of our prominent acharyas, and actually he was probably the greatest scholar. Prabhupada mentioned he was the greatest Vaishnava scholar of all times, and a scholar of such monumental proportion that all other Vaishnava scholars just pale to insignificance, and particularly material scholars, they just pale to insignificance in comparison to him. If you've ever taken the time to read the Sandarbhas or any of his commentaries or treatises or anything like that, it's just outstanding. It's just astounding, actually, his level of scholarship. So again, presenting this webinar on Jiva Goswami is an attempt to offer my deep gratitude and appreciation to Jiva Goswami for delivering the science of Krishna consciousness in such a systematic way, and especially the teachings expounded by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the other Goswamis. He presented it, he deeply analysed it and presented it in a very, very systematic manner. So it's quite profound, actually. Now, his scientific presentation of the path of bhakti, and also his stellar example of Krishna consciousness and Vaishnava Char, are a guide and inspiration to countless generations of Vaishnavas now, in the past, and also in the future for thousands of years to come. And also part of this presentation, we're going to explore what his contribution, not only we're going to look at his life in brief, some of his qualities and things like that, the legacy he left behind, but also we'll look at his contribution to deity worship, and his involvement in deity worship, and also how to shape the deity worship today, as we see in ISKCON. And the idea behind this is to help us to understand why it is we do what we do, and not that it's just based on some need of the moment or anything like that, but actually that it's coming from a deep philosophical perspective, and this will help us to really see why we're doing what we're doing. Yeah. And again, I'd like to help Vijay Baladev from South Africa for assisting me in putting together this webinar. He did a lot of the preliminary research, which is very, very grateful for that. And as mentioned previously, the plan is to do presentations on all of our major acharyas. So far, we've covered Srila Rupa Goswami. Now we're doing Jiva Goswami. Could also plan to look at the other six Goswamis, particularly Sanatana Goswami, because as we know, Sanatana Goswami and also Gopal Bhatta Goswami were very much involved in the book, Hari Bhakti Vilas. Sorry, this book I should know very well. Yeah, the Hari Bhakti Vilas. And also looking at Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Actually, many of his contributions to deity worship really shape what we have in ISKCON today. And Srila Prabhupada largely followed his example. And of course, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and some of the other acharyas as well. And I'll also reach out again that if anyone is interested in helping, as with Vijay Baladev and also Bal Krishna Prabhu in Singapore, then please just let me know, and be happy to give you a topic to research. Okay, so tomorrow is Srila Jiva Goswami's disappearance day, at least here in Australia it is. And he's such an important figure in our Sampradaya. I'd like to start with a little prayer. I'm not really sure where this has come from. I heard Shivaram Maharaj reciting this prayer, so I've been able to capture it, and I try to regularly recite it. And the prayer is Sri Rupa Charana Dvandva Raginam Rajavasinam Sri Jivam Satatam Bande Mandeshvananda Dayanam. I offer my repeated humble obeisance unto Srila Jiva Goswami, whose heart is constantly attracted to the lotus feet of Srila Rupa Goswami. He is the crest jewel of all Brajvasis, and due to his causeless mercy, he bestows unimaginable joy, even to the non-philosophical, dull-headed, and lazy people, by his deep philosophical views. So a very, very nice prayer to Srila Jiva Goswami. So, actually, what I meant to just share the slide presentation. You can bear with me for a second. Krishna Chaitanya. Where are we? Slide presentation. Hare Krishna. Okay, so Srila Jiva Goswami. So, yeah, he was not just a great Vaishnava author, but actually, from our perspective as Gaudiya Vaishnavas, he was the greatest Vaishnava author. Srila Prabhupada would regularly laud his ability as an author and commenter. Okay, so let's get right into it. So, as we have done in many of our other seminars, we'll first answer a few questions like, who is he, when was he born, when did he live? So to address the point of who is he, according to the Gaura Ganadesh Dipika, which is an interesting book, which is analyzing who the major characters in Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela were in Krishna Leela. And in the case of Jiva Goswami, he was actually the last Manjari. And yeah, he had quite a deep relationship with Rupa Goswami, but also, I've forgotten, but there's a certain personality that he serves under. I've forgotten. Sorry about that. I forgot. But it was connected with who he was serving in Krishna in Gaura Leela. But it's very interesting. When was he born? Now this is kind of interesting. I just look at this, his birth and early years. Biographical information about Jiva Goswami is very, very scarce. Even like we see, with his birth date, there is disagreement with amongst the various philosophers about when Jiva Goswami was born. Some feel that he was born in 1511, passed away in 1596. Others say 1533 and passed away in 1618. This is common era. I can't remember what it is, Shakabda. I think there's 73 or 78 years difference between the two times. But it's likely that Jiva appeared somewhere around 1530 Common Era. Now, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says this is probably an approximation, but it wouldn't have been any later than this, because we understand that Lord Chaitanya visited Ramakeli in 1513, and there he met with Rupa, Sanatan, and Anupam. And according to various texts, Jiva Goswami witnessed that, and even we see in the Navadvip Dham Mahatmya, Jiva Goswami relates to Lord Nityananda how he had actually witnessed this meeting. So it would, like 1513 would be the latest, and potentially as early as 1511, which is kind of, it's quite extraordinary when you think of it, because if it was 1511, it means he was probably not even a toddler at that point. It was the year of his, the year of his birth was the year that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to Ramakeli, where he grew up. And even if it was as early as 1511, it still means in maximum he was 2 years old. And he still remembered clearly every detail of the loving exchange between his father and uncles and Lord Chaitanya. And so much so that this inspired him throughout his whole life. And his whole aspiration was simply to become the servant of Lord Chaitanya, which, as we know, he did. Now, he was born in Ramakeli in the district of Malda, West Bengal, as the son. It's not West Bengal anymore nowadays, it's in Bangladesh. But he was the son of Sri Ballabha Malika. Sri Ballabha later became known as Anupam. And Sri Vallabha was the younger brother of Amar and Santosh, who then became Shakya Malik and W. Kash under the Muslim ruler, and then later were initiated as Rupa and Sanatan. And it's not known the name of his mother, but according to the text I read, she was a great Vaishnavi. According to actually, yeah, I was mentioning that before, that Jiva Goswami witnessed the loving interaction between his father and uncles and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is recorded in the Bhakti Ratnakar and also in the Navadvip Dham Mahatmya. Now, Bhakti Ratnakar is not the most reliable of sources because, according to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, this book was written 300 years after the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and according to him, there are some historical inaccuracies in this book. So not always the most reliable. But there is a book written by the Gaudiya Math, or produced by the Gaudiya Math, and it's called Samsparsha Gauranga something. I can't remember the name of it. I'm trying to get a copy of that book. Apparently it has been translated, so I'm trying to get a hold of that copy. And it discusses a lot about the various associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And it's also described there that in at least in Navadvip Dham Mahatmya, that when Jiva was witnessing the interaction between his father, uncles, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his eyes just filled with tears. He was just so overwhelmed by this exchange. And as I said, it stuck with him throughout his life. Now, Jiva Goswami is also identified as a Mahapurusha. That means, great personality who's beyond the influence of the modes of material nature. And as I mentioned, according to Gaur Ganadesh Dipika, he's Vilas Manjari in Krishna Lila. Now, this time, or this meeting in Ramakeli, which is very interesting because Lord Chaitanya deliberately went there. It wasn't like it was accidental or a chance meeting. He deliberately went there to meet with the Goswamis, particularly Rupa, Sanatana, and Anupam, even though it was, he on the pretext of going to Vrindavan. But anyone who's seen the map can understand that Ramakeli is nowhere near Vrindavan. It's not even slightly on the way to Vrindavan. But nonetheless, Mahaprabhu went there with the sole purpose of meeting Rupa, Sanatana, and also Anupam. And there must have also been some element of making this connection with Jiva. And this was actually the only time that Jiva Goswami physically or directly saw Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And it was such a powerful experience for him that it remained with him throughout his life and impelled him on the path of bhakti. And of course, obviously the person he is as Vilas Manjari, this was also a part of. Okay. Let's see. Then he appeared on the 12th day of the bright fortnight in the month of Bhadra, which is tomorrow. He disappeared, from this planet at the age of 85. So he lived quite a good, a lengthy life. And this was on the 3rd day of the bright fortnight in the month of Porsha. He, right from the beginning of childhood, he had a strong affinity for the worship of Krishna, and he excelled in education, completing his studies in the Sanskrit Vyakarana or grammar and poetics with a very short period. When Jiva was quite young, it's a bit hard to say how old, but possibly 3 or 4, his uncles resigned from the ministerial post in the court of Nawab Hussain Shah after their initial meeting with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and then they decided to join with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. His father, also Anupam, he followed in the footsteps of his elder brothers, and he travelled with Rupa to Vrindavan. Then when Rupa Goswami was coming back to Puri, actually, they were travelling through Bengal, and Anupam gave up his life at that point. Then this had quite, and that was actually in the year 1514. So it may be, when his father passed away, maybe he was 3, 4, something like that, maybe a little bit younger, but he's quite young regardless. And this this event was quite devastating for Jiva and had a tremendous effect on him. And although he was only very young, I mean, potentially, somewhere between 2 and 5 years old, he resolved to renounce the world and all its cruelties. And thus, he developed this burning passion for spiritual enlightenment. And so he studied very, very deeply all the scriptures. He had such a passion to study the Shastra and to understand the science of bhakti. And it's described in the Bhakti Ratnakar, but at this point he began worshipping deities of Krishna Balaram. And actually he made these deities himself. I'm not sure what he made them of. Potentially he made them from, I guess, wood. Doesn't actually say what he made them from. But and he worshipped these deities, as his life and soul, because normally you see children of that age that they'll get absorbed in play and things like that. But Jiva Goswami, his idea of play was to serve his deities, and he had various dreams at this age. One of the dreams was Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda appeared to him, and in the dream he wanted to take shelter of Lord Chaitanya. For the remainder of his life, and Lord Chaitanya said, no, it's better you actually take shelter of Nityananda. He's much more merciful than me. So then he approached Nityananda in the dream. Nityananda said, yes, you should take Lord Chaitanya as a life and soul. And so he did that. And then he saw another dream he had. He saw them engaged in kirtan. The dream broke, and it was ecstatic kirtan. He was so affected, by the dream breaking, that he was just praying, oh, let me go back to sleep so I can enter back into this dream. And then when he went back to sleep, his deities Krishna and Balaram appeared before him in the dream. And then Krishna and Balaram, they manifested as Krishna and Balaram directly. And then they were in this kirtan, and then he actually realized that this Krishna and Balaram are directly Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu. And he at various times he had various dreams and got instructions from the deities in his dreams. So so that was his meeting Lord Chaitanya, childhood, and his father's death. Then we see that at an early age, right from the very beginning, because Rupa and Sanatan left for Vrindavan quite early on in his life. He had this strong desire to join them, but he was just too young to travel. And at one point, he wanted to go to. He heard Lord Nityananda was in Navadvip, so he decided that he wanted to go and see Lord Nityananda, but he was too young, and his mother was reluctant to let him go. So he said to his mother that I'm going to our ancestral home and to visit our ancestral home. But actually, when he got on the boat, he convinced the boatman to take him to Navadvip. And then when he went to Navadvip, he met with Nityananda Prabhu. And actually, there's a very, very wonderful description is given in the Navadvip Dham Mahatmya, which this is a very, very lovely book here that I've been reading. It describes a lot about the pastimes of the first parikrama, if you like, of Navadvip, and how Jiva Goswami, Jiva Goswami and Lord Nityananda went on parikrama to all the holy places in Navadvip. It would be quite a wonderful experience actually to have Lord Nityananda as your tour guide in Navadvip. But this book is all about that, and it's a revelation of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So very, very amazing. And he met with all the associates of the Lord who were still alive. Satyamata was still alive, as was Vishnupriya, and Srivas Thakur was also there, one of the members of the Panchatattva. So there's many, many great souls were still there, and they bestowed their blessings upon Jiva for his spiritual evolution. And then at that time, Jiva he took shelter from Nityananda Prabhu, and Lord Nityananda gave him his blessings at that point, because Jiva shared with him, after they'd gone to all the 9 islands of Navadvip, Jiva shared with Nityananda Prabhu that he had this burning desire to go to Vrindavan, and so Lord Nityananda he gave his blessings to Jiva Goswami to go to Vrindavan, But he said, first you should go to Benares. And at the time, Benares, or Varanasi, was one of the great seats of learning in India. And there he said you should seek out Madhusudan Vachaspati, who at that time was a renowned scholar, but also he was a prominent disciple of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, because Jiva had this idea he wanted to go to Puri and study under Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, because Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had learnt all the conclusions of the Bhakti scriptures directly from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he thought, well, I'll go there and I'll learn from Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. But Nityananda said, no, you should go to Vrindavan, but because Benares was on the way, he said, go to Vrindavan, and on the way there you stop in Benares and you study under Madhusudan Vachaspati, who has learnt from Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And so he went there and he studied Sanskrit and many branches of Vedic knowledge, and he became very proficient in a very short time. So as I mentioned, he stopped in Benares and he found Madhusudan Vachaspati, and then under his guidance he very quickly mastered various types of Sanskrit grammars, because there's many different types of grammars. He mastered the Vedas, astrology, and also what's known as the Saddarshans, or the six systems of philosophy, and many different Vedic texts and all types of fields of scholarship in a very short time. Then after he had been studying there for a while, he recalled the instructions of Nityananda Prabhu, and also this burning desire he had to go to Vrindavan. And then so from there he set out for Vrindavan. Now keep in mind, it's not like he jumped on a plane or he jumped on a train and just in a very short time he arrived in Vrindavan. In those days people walked everywhere. So he walked from Benares, first off he walked from Navadvip to Benares. Benares is kind of like halfway across India from West Bengal, and that would have taken him many days. And then from there, after studying there for some time, he walked from Benares to Vrindavan. It'd be interesting to actually, I guess on Google, Google Maps, you could figure out how long it would take to walk that distance. But it'd be very quite an arduous journey. But nonetheless, he undertook that journey, and he arrived in Vrindavan. Now, in the scriptures, it's recorded that he arrived in Vrindavan in 1535. So, if we look at it, when did he go to? It's described as 15. Hang on, that's 1540 was when his father passed away, so he was 14. Anyhow, it was a few years later. I did come across somewhere where it mentioned what year he went to Benares, but I can't remember what it is. And then, so from there he went to Vrindavan. He arrived in Vrindavan in 1535, and in Vrindavan he was warmly welcomed by all the different Goswamis. And in some of the descriptions I've read, it mentioned that actually they were standing there waiting for him. They knew he was coming, and they all stood there to receive him. And there was, of course, there were the other Goswamis there. He was, as far as I recall, he was probably the last of the Goswamis to arrive in Vrindavan. So obviously Sanatan and Rupa were already there. Then Raghunath Das, Raghunath Bhatta, and Gopal Bhatta Goswamis were also there in Vrindavan. They were standing there waiting to receive him. And then also Bhugava Goswami, Lokanath Goswami, and so many other brilliant scholars of the Vedas and very advanced devotees were just waiting for him to arrive in Vrindavan, and they all received him very very lovingly, and because of his service attitude, his wonderful disposition, his scholarship, and his great deep devotion, he became very dear to all the residents of Vrindavan, and he would serve them all very well, in a very menial way, and they actually became very satisfied with Jiva Goswami, and bestow their blessings upon him. Then when he arrived there, he started to study the Shastras under his uncles, Sanatan and Rupa. And at one point, he approached Sanatana Goswami, and he asked Sanatana Goswami to accept him as his disciple. But then Sanatana Goswami, out of humility, said, "Actually, no, I'm not qualified to be your disciple. You should actually approach Rupa Goswami, because he is the most qualified. So you should take shelter of him." And so he approached Rupa Goswami. And Rupa Goswami accepted him. He said, "Yes, okay, I'll accept you as my disciple." But he didn't give him initiation immediately. He actually he tested him with to see, I guess, to test his mettle, to see if he was, how genuine. Of course, we know he was very genuine, and I'm sure Rupa Goswami knew he was very genuine. But he wanted to show the seriousness of the process of diksha, and how important it is to take proper shelter of a guru, and not that it's just a cheap sort of thing we do, because we see that if devotees take it cheaply, then they give it up very easily. But he wanted to impress upon Jiva Goswami, but also I think the people in general, that actually taking the diksha is a very serious business. So he engaged him in very, very simple services like cleaning the ashram, making arrangements for the deity, preparing bog offerings, things like that. He also used to prepare for Rupa and Sanatana. He would prepare the palm leaves that they would write on, and also the pens that they would write with, and many wonderful menial services he would do. And because they were worshipping Radha Govinda at that time, so he would prepare the deity paraphernalia. He'd make garlands, all sorts of simple services he would do. Then after some time, he accepted initiation from Srila Rupa Goswami and was taught the elevated principles of devotion to Krishna. And Jiva Goswami also helped Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis with their writing. He would edit their writing, etc., and also help them in propagating Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and also assisted in excavating the various lost holy places. Because for those of you who've been to Vrindavan, you're aware that there's many holy places where we can go and visit. But in the times of Rupa and Sanatana, or even before with Lord Chaitanya, there was no sign of these holy places. I actually had to discover them and excavate them. Radha Kund, Sharma Kund, all these different places. I actually had to discover where they were and excavate them. Now, there's a couple of interesting stories that took place there, and one was about a pundit called Rup Narayan. Now, he used to call himself the Digvijay Pundit, and he would travel around, and he's apparently very, very arrogant person. But his idea was to, he had this paper called a Vijay Patra, and he would go to visit the different villages and places like that, and then challenge people to philosophical discussions, debates, and he would defeat them because he was very knowledgeable, and then he would get them to sign on this Vijay Patra that yes, the Rup Narayan has defeated me, and they put their name. And so he approached Rupa and Sanatana, and because he heard they were the greatest scholars in Vrindavan, and they weren't really interested because they could see this was just a mundane fellow, and he was just doing this for pride, out of pride, and just so he could bring glory to himself. He had his piece of paper, and he challenged it. This Vijay Pandit, Rup Narayan, he challenged them, and he said, I want to challenge you to debate because I want you to sign my certificate so I can show that I'm the greatest scholar. And Rupa and Sanatana said, we don't know anything. We're just so insignificant. Don't waste your time with us. And they said, no. The Rupa Narayan said, but everyone's saying you're such great scholars. He said, they're just our followers, they're friends. They just they're saying things about us because they like us, but they're not really true. Anyhow, so to cut a wonderful long story short, essentially they just said, look, just give us your paper and we'll sign the paper and be done with it. then he heard, after he left there, that actually Jiva Goswami is almost as brilliant as a scholar. He's up and coming scholar. He's almost as brilliant as Rupa and Sanatan. So he went to Jiva Goswami. He held up his paper. He said, "See, I have defeated your uncles here. Now you should sign this paper also." But then when Jiva Goswami heard that Rupa and Sanatan, how he was going around and saying how he had defeated the greatest scholars, he couldn't tolerate that he was blaspheming them in this way, and so he challenged this Rupa Narayan to a debate. And then after 7 days of discussing, the Shastras, he just completely defeated him. And some renditions of the story say how Rupa Narayan he sort of quietly snuck out of Vrindavan so no one would realize he was defeated, because he was quite embarrassed by the whole thing. And then Jiva Goswami, he went to tell Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami what had happened. And he was thinking that Rupa Goswami would be happy, but Rupa Goswami was actually very, very displeased that he'd done this. And he said, you have done this out of pride. You want to establish yourself as a scholar. Therefore, you're not humble enough to reside in Vrindavan. You should leave Vrindavan immediately. And so he did, and he went and lived in Mathura, but he lived in a very, very simple way. I've heard it described that he actually lived in the hole of a tree, and very, very simple, very, very simple. He was performing very, very extreme austerities because he felt that he had deeply offended his spiritual master. So he wanted to atone for that. So anyway, he was fasting. He was chanting, continuously chanting the holy name, and just immersed in lamentation, actually. And Sanatana Goswami was habituated to traveling around Vrindavan, and he would visit people, and under the guise of just friendly sort of visiting. But actually, what he was doing was giving them Krishna consciousness. And then when he, at one point, he was visiting a village and he heard, there's this sadhu here who's living in this log, and he's just chanting the holy names, and he's constantly crying out, and he's crying and lamenting and that. And then Sanatana Goswami actually understood it was Jiva Goswami, and then so he went and found Jiva. He took him back to Vrindavan, and he said to Rupa Goswami, he said, actually, you've neglected some of the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Rupa Goswami was like, really? What is that I've neglected? He said, and Sanatana Goswami said, you go through them one at a time, and I'll tell you when you get to it. And he went through them one after the other, and finally he got to Jiva Doya. And when he got to Jiva Doya, he said, Rupa Goswami realized, I understand what Sanatana Goswami is saying here. He's saying, I've neglected Jiva. So then he accepted Jiva back, and Jiva had become quite sick at that time. So it's described how Sanatana Goswami nursed him back to health. That's one of the stories. There are several stories like that, but you can read the different stories. Actually, I think there's some of them which are contained in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Now, Sanatana Goswami was extraordinarily humble. When he was chastised by Rupa Goswami, and there were similar things happen on a number of occasions. I think twice at least it happened. He was chastised by Rupa Goswami, and he didn't try to defend himself in any way. He did not try to explain what he was doing. He just accepted the humility, and he accepted what Rupa Goswami, the instruction he gave him, and just tried to the best of his capacity to carry out the instructions of his guru as his life and soul. Also, physically, he was very, very extraordinarily beautiful. It's described even as a child, he was just so wonderfully beautiful. And extreme renunciation. His renunciation, the second time he was exiled from Vrindavan, he was just eating, the villagers would bring him some flour, and he'd mix it with a bit of Jamuna water, and he'd just eat that. That was all he would eat. And he had no interest in, because he came from a wealthy background. He had no interest in personal wealth. He had no interest in having a nice situation for himself. He was very, very renounced. And his heart was always full of ecstatic love for the Lord. He's crying tears of ecstasy constantly. Additionally, he was a brilliant scholar. He compiled at least 400 Sanskrit verses. This is stated in the Antya-lila in chapter 4, how he compiled at least 400,000 Sanskrit verses. This is quite an accomplishment. Then after, we go on to the next one, then after Rupa and Sanatan passed away, Jiva Goswami became the foremost authority in the Gaudiya Vaishnava line. And in 1542, he actually established one of the more prominent temples in Vrindavan, which is Radha Damodar. Now, an interesting story here is that the deities of Radha Damodar were hand-carved by Rupa Goswami for Jiva Goswami. His love for Jiva Goswami is very, very great. And he carved these deities himself. He worshipped them. Rupa Goswami worshipped them for some time himself. And then he handed them over to Jiva Goswami. And then Jiva Goswami established the Radha Damodar temple. He also established the Vishva Vaishnava Raja Sabha, which is the World Vaishnava Association. I think also Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur did something similar. And the Rupanuga Vidyapit, which was an educational facility for Gaudiya Vaishnavas to study the works of Rupa and Sanatan. He also established a library, and he gathered all the original texts of the writings of all the different Goswamis, of Lokanath Goswami, of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, of the other, Rupa, Jiva, Raghunath Das, Raghunath Bhatta, Gopal Bhatta. He gathered all this information together and put it into a library. Then in 1958, sorry, 1958, and he also accepted, at this point, he accepted Narottam Das Thakur, Dukhi Krishnadas, and Srinivas Acharya as his students. And then in 1558, after he'd been teaching them some time, Janava Mata requested Jiva Goswami to send these students, Narottam, Srinivas, and Dukhi Krishnadas, who is now known as Shyamananda, to Bengal to promote Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. So he did that, and he gave them copies of all the original manuscripts written by Rupa and Sanatan and the other Goswamis, but on the way they were stolen. They managed to get them back, etc. It's quite a lengthy story, but a very, very beautiful story also. And also, one of the things that Jiva Goswami did very prominently was he promoted the Srimad Bhagavatam as the foremost of all scriptures. And as we see, also Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has also promoted Srimad Bhagavatam as the most spotless of all scriptures. So he was also very, very expert at that. And then we have his literary contribution was just outstanding. There are at least 25 significant works that Jiva Goswami gave, and they come in the category of treatises such as the Sandarbhas and also the Radha Krishna Archana Dipika, or sometimes called the Krishna Archana Dipika. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little while. Also different commentaries on commentaries on the Bhagavatam, the Krama Sandarbha, commentaries on the Brahma Samhita, commentary on the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Ujjvala Nilamani, Gopal Tapani Upanishad. So many different commentaries are there. Grammar, he wrote the Harinam Namamrita Vyakarana, which is quite a substantial book, which is a commentary on, well, not a commentary, sorry, it's a book on grammar. But every single word in this book, he connects it to Krishna. He shows how this word is referring to Krishna. He also wrote some quite amazing poetic works. One in particular was the Gopal Champu, which is a 2-volume book. And Srila Prabhupada in the Adi Lila, chapter 10, verse 85, he lists all the major works of Jiva Goswami. Then the next thing we want to look at is Jiva Goswami left this world in likely around 1596, although, as I say, it's a little bit hard to know exactly the date. Some scholars say 1618. Just depends which biography you read. And his body was put into samadhi. Actually, his body wasn't put into samadhi. My understanding is because there was fear of the Muslims desecrating his samadhi. His body was burnt and his ashes were put in samadhi, and just to the if you're looking at the temple, Radha temple, just on the left-hand side there, you go through the doorway there, you'll see that Jiva Goswami Samadhi is there. And then on the other side, you'll see that there's Rupa Goswami Samadhi in Bhajan Kutya. And yeah, so that's where he was put into Samadhi. Now, just a few quick comments on deity worship. As I mentioned before, Rupa Goswami established the worship of Madan Mohan in Ramakeli. He certainly would have been a witness to that. And he established deities of Krishna Balaram, or he made deities of Krishna Balaram and worship them as his life and soul. And it was explained that he was 24 hours a day absorbed in the worship of Krishna Balaram, even though he was only a small child, possibly somewhere between the ages of 3 to about 10 that would have happened. So very, very extraordinary that so young he was so dedicated to serving the deities. Then, of course, he was engaged in the worship of Radha Damodar in Sri Vrindavan Dham. Then, in terms of his contribution to deity worship, there's quite a few interesting points there. And one of the things that stands out very strong from the Radha Krishna Archana Deepika is that he makes this point that that only proud persons will worship Govinda and then not worship the followers of Govinda after they complete their worship of Govinda, and therefore they will not receive the mercy of the Lord. And then he quotes from the Padma Purana this verse, Aradhananam Sarveshvam, which is pointing out that of all types of worship of Lord Vishnu is best, and better than worship of Lord Vishnu is the worship of his devotee, the Vaishnava. So Jiva Goswami established this as an integral part of deity worship for Gaudiya Vaishnavas, is to, after you worship the deity, then you worship the Vaishnavas. And this is the practice we follow. Then, of course, in his Bhakti Sandarbha, he established the importance of deity worship and mentioned that deity worship was essential for all followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he pointed out this is quoting the Bhakti Sandarbha 283-284. He points out that because of the influence of the modes of material nature in this day and age, then deity worship is essential. That, he said, he said, what was the point he made was, I can't remember the exact wording he used, but he said they must engage in deity worship, which is a very important point. Then, of course, in his commenting on the Bhagavatam and talking about the different materials that deities are made from, stone, wood, metal, earth, paint, sand, the mind, jewels, he talks about the different types of deities and how some people establish deities temporarily and some people establish deities permanently. But those who establish deities temporarily, they do it to fulfill material desires. Whereas those devotees who establish deities permanently, they do this simply to satisfy the Lord with a desire to attain pure love of Godhead. And so generally the devotees who establish deities permanently, they'll make them out of marble or some sort of stone or metal or wood or something like that. Something that's a little bit more durable rather than sand or any of these different types of things, earth, whatever, things like that are not necessarily so durable. And then also Jiva Goswami mentions that the rules and regulations concerning deity worship are meant for help, and also the discussions, the offences, are meant for helping one to avoid disrespectful or neglectful attitude towards the deity. So it's really important, that the rules and regulations are there to help us to understand the proper approach to serving the deity, so that we don't at any point become familiar. And we see this happen sometimes, that devotees become familiar, thinking they may have some sort of personal or intimate relationship with the Lord. But actually we need to understand that this whole mood of this dasa anudasa, that I'm simply a servant of the Lord, I'm no one special. And Srila Prabhupada himself emphasized this in many different situations, where he would emphasize that we should not become puffed up. We should just think, that we're just a humble servant of the Lord. And in this way, we can derive the benefits of the process of deity worship. So we see here that Jiva Goswami had quite a significant contribution to make in terms of deity worship, and how this contribution has also influenced where we are today in ISKCON in terms of deity worship. So very, very important to understand the contribution he made. Now, in conclusion, I'd just like to say that Jiva Goswami's appearance day or disappearance day is very, very important for us as Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And it's a wonderful opportunity for us to pray to Srila Jiva Goswami for his mercy. Then on this auspicious occasion of the appearance of Jiva Goswami, let us pray to be able to practice Krishna consciousness in the same way he did, with this great determination. Jiva Goswami, he dedicated his life and soul to the service of his spiritual master, Rupa Goswami, and also to Lord Chaitanya. So let us pray that he may bless us, that we can also dedicate our lives in the same way. And you may remember the verse that I recited at the beginning. So it starts off, Sri Rupa Charana Dvandva. Rupa Goswami's heart is constantly attracted to the two lotuses, Dvandva, the two lotus feet of Sri, is Charana Dvandvas, right? The two lotus feet of Sri Rupa Goswami. May I develop the same attraction to the lotus feet of Sri Rupa Goswami. Then it says, Raganam Rajavasinam. He's the crest jewel of all Rajavasis. So let's pray to Jiva Goswami to guide us so we can become qualified to reside in Vrindavan, and then please to grant us eternal residence, the lotus feet of Sri Radha Shyama in Sri Vrindavan Dham. Then it goes on to say, Sri Jivam Satatam Bande. Let me offer my repeated obeisances to Sri Jiva Goswami. So let us offer our obeisances again and again and again to Srila Jiva Goswami. Then the last thing it says is Mandeshvananda Dayanam. He bestows unimaginable bliss upon the dull-headed and lazy people. So, in this age, we're so dull-headed, we're so lazy. We see with the Goswamis, they work so vigorously to propagate Krishna consciousness. And, in this age, people, it says, Mandas Manda Matayo, that people are so lazy, they're misguided, they're lazy, and they're always disturbed. So let's pray to Jiva Goswami to please bestow your mercy upon this dull-headed and lazy fool, so they may experience the bliss of devotional service eternally. Srila Jiva Goswami Ki Jai. Okay, so thank you very much for your patiently listening. Are there any questions or comments on that at all? Please, I'd love to hear what you have to say. I'll just see if I can figure it all out. You're patiently listening. Are there any questions or comments? Oh, sorry about that. Krishna Chaitanya. Let me see if I can find the comments. Here we go. Chat, yes, I want the chat. No, I can't figure this out.
Can I ask a dumb question, Prabhu?
I don't know where the chat's gone. I'll stop the share. That might help me. I'm not sure where the chat's gone. There it is. Let's see. Okay, chat is here. So, any comments at all? Questions?
Prabhu, thanks again for everything. Venkat Surya from Canberra. Can you see me? They've changed Facebook, and it's a little bit difficult to figure out how to work it now. Probably if you could type your comment, that would be much easier. Okay, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Venkat Surya is saying dull-headed and lazy. That definitely sounds like me. So you have a question, Venkat? Huh? Okay, there doesn't seem like any comments are coming through on Facebook. some guidance. In what way, Venkat, what way do you feel you need guidance in this regard? So just in terms of Venkat's through what you're saying, there's some direction or guidance. The thing is, like, everyone in this age is as is mentioned in the beginning of Bhagavatam, it says, Manda Samanda Matayo Manda Bhagyahi, that they're dull-headed, they're lazy, they're quarrelsome, short-lived, unlucky, misguided, always disturbed. This is the nature of living entity in this material world, especially in Kali Yuga, very, very deeply affected by material desires and thinking. You just look around you in the world, and people are thinking that material life or material enjoyment, this is where it's all at. This is everything's about. Just trying to enjoy myself in this material world. So they become covered over by the most material nature. But when we take the process of bhakti, then this enables us to gradually overcome this situation where we're considering that the material life or material goals is our aim of life, and it helps us to start to reawaken the intrinsic nature of the self as a servant of Krishna. So by praying to the Lord, praying to Jiva Goswami, for instance, in this case, to help us to overcome this deep contamination that's there, it goes right to the very core of the heart, then gradually we'll become intelligent and we'll realize our actual position in this material world. Then Vijay Baladev was asked, are there any authorized translations of the Sandarbhas available for ISKCON devotees? As far as I know, the BBT has put some out. Mother Mongol, you would know about that. What Sandarbhas have the BBT released so far? Do you know? Because if they're there, Mother Mongol probably has them. But I certainly know they have released one or two. Well, he doesn't think there are any. Okay, I thought they had released some, but maybe it's a project they're working on, because I know that Keshav Bharati Maharaj was writing some, or he was actually proofreading, and this was going back years that he had done this, that he was proofreading the commentary, the Sandarbhas that Gopi Pranadana had been working on. So I'm sure there's some have been released. I'm not sure which ones, but I'm sure some have been released by the BBT. So I would say that they're definitely authorized translations of the Sandarbhas. There are others that are around. I know that also Kushakrata did translation of the Sandarbhas. I don't know how exact and accurate they are. Bhanu Swami has also done translation of the Sandarbhas. Murli Manohar, thank you for that. So yeah, Bhanu Swami's translations would be good. He's quite good. I often refer to his translations. Yeah, so there's definitely some work out there. Then Madhu Manga was asking, what would you say Jiva Goswami's overall contribution to Vaishnavism? Well, I mean, there's many things that he's done. One of the things for certain is his emphasis on the Srimad Bhagavatam, and his primary writing, the Sandarbhas, is actually a thematic commentary on the Bhagavatam, where he's gone through and he's given different themes, and he's expanded those themes based on the verses of the Bhagavatam. And so very deep analysis of the Bhagavatam. Also, his systematic approach to the study of the scriptures and the presentation of the scriptures. He also he was the first one, as far as I understand, who actually encapsulated the philosophy of Achinta Bheda Bheda Tattva. this notion of simultaneous oneness and difference, which actually runs through all elements of Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. Obviously the key element is demonstrating how the Lord is simultaneously one and different from the manifestation. But so that he's definitely done that. I think that his major elements, but also just largely from his writings, we can find so much clear direction in Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. And as I was saying, he's very systematically presented. So it's his analysis of because if you look at the Bhagavatam, when you look at these other texts, sometimes there's information there which is a little bit difficult to understand. But the way that Jiva Goswami has analysed it is very, very clear to understand. I'll give you an example. There's in some places it mentions that Ananta is Ananta Shesha is an expansion of Balaram, and in other places it mentions that Ananta Shesha is Jiva. So I had asked many devotees about that, if they could explain that to me, and I never really came across an explanation that was satisfactory. And then one time I asked Bhanu Swami, I said, Maharaj, please explain. He said actually Jiva Goswami says that when Ananta Shesh is in this mood of servant of Godhead, where he's expanding as all these items, like the Lord's Brahman thread and the couch and all these types of things, he said that is an expansion of Godhead. That's Vishnu Tattva. But when he's in this feature of holding all the universes on his head, then that's a jiva, like a Shaktivesh, an empowered jiva is doing that. So we see that he's given very clear elucidation on the many elements of the scriptures. So very, very important for us. Now, Motor Mongols put another comment there. The BBT Publishing Group has released a translation and commentary on Jiva Goswami's Tattva Sandarbha. So that was the one that I remember Keshav Bhakti Maharaj was doing the editing on. So so he's done the Tattva Sandarbha. And I do think that they are working on the other Sandarbhas, but it's a very, very big project. And since Gopi Paramadana has passed away, they don't have as many devotees working on translating, or as capable as Gopi Paramadana, who was very, very capable in his translation. So so hopefully in due course of time these other books will be done. But tomorrow's a very, very good day to be praying to Srila Jiva Goswami to give us some guidance to help us to understand the process of bhakti, to help us to become fixed in our meditation on Sri Vrindavan Dham, and to become fixed at the lotus feet of Srila Rupa Goswami. So again, I'd like to thank you very much for your time. It's very kind of you to take this time to listen to some of the glories of Jiva Goswami. Of course, it's a topic we could speak about for a long, long time. And in a short period of 1 hour, I mean, how much can you really say? But I'm grateful for the opportunity to say something. So, Srila Jiva Goswami ki jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Go Premanandi.